As the old saying goes, the whole creative industry runs on Apple. And for years now, Apple has been doing a lot to make the mobile Mac experience truly something special and an actual reasonable alternative for professionals. And in the past few years, the MacBook Pro has been taking quite a few steps to finally become a great Mac alternative for people on the go. And the introduction of the Touch Bar back in 2016 brought it even closer to that goal. But Apple has done it again, and through their determination and technical progress, they created this, the 2020 MacBook Pro. More specifically, the 13-inch one that I have right here. This is finally the mobile, powerful tool creators all over the world crave, or have Apple missed the mark? Well, let's find out, shall we? Now, right from the start, you can tell Apple really means business with this model. Like most MacBooks, it looks absolutely amazing from the outside. Sleek, minimalist, and overall rather light and portable. But then you open it up and you witness it. The glory of the MacBook Pro screen. Apple really outdone themselves here, making a screen that's both excellent for media consumption on the go, but also for color critical, creative and professional work on the go. The now signature Apple Retina 13.3-inch screen is here, with a 2560 by 1600 resolution that looks so crisp, it's absolutely insane. The one thing to keep in mind though, however, is that is a 16 by 10 aspect ratio, not the 16:9 seen on most normal displays. Plus, it being an IPS panel just adds to that wow factor. So yeah, finding such displays anywhere else is a real difficulty. And seeing how Apple have bundled such an amazing screen to the, younger and cheaper cousin to the 16-inch MacBook Pro is just amazing. However, of course, for ages now, what has been really blocking the path of these kind of devices has been the performance, because for a long time you couldn't really put too much performance into here, and as workloads have gotten more and more complex, like you have people editing videos in like 8K, even 12K nowadays, laptops and even MacBook Pros just haven't been able to keep up. And seeing how you can get MacBook Pros with even something like a quad-core CPU, then Apple has either gone insane or they simply just don't understand their target audience. And my MacBook Pro over here hosts what's a pretty good starter configuration. It has a quad-core 8th gen i5 CPU from Intel, 16GB of RAM, and Intel Iris Pro 645 graphics, and it can go all the way up to a quad-core 10th gen i7 and 32GB of RAM. Which at first glance, of course, seems like a pretty poor configuration. If you told anyone who does the performance-intensive work on a PC to edit on this, they'll just laugh at you, because come on, 4 Intel cores and a GPU that's not even from Team Green or even Team Red. That's like the laughingstock of the laughingstock, and yet here it is, proudly displayed as a real option for people who want to do everything they do on the go with a MacBook Pro. And the fact that it's an 8th gen CPU as well, so 2 generations old at this point, just kind of adds to this whole confusion. This MacBook Pro really has surprised me, however, as its performance, despite its low specs, is still rather amazing. Whether it is in HitFilm, the software I use for most of my editing, or even in Premiere Pro, the overall editing experience is rather smooth. Now, granted, I had to turn down playback resolution all the way to 1/4, but apart from that, the whole experience has been rather smooth. So even with a pretty basic config like the one here, you can still expect pretty good performance in the Adobe Suite, which is, what most people use, and even in the Apple-specific software, it also has performed rather well. In Geekbench, it got a score that's rather unimpressive, but still rather good for a laptop. And in Cinebench, it didn't really do that much better. If you just compare that Cinebench score to a Ryzen 3700X, a very decent baseline CPU, which is super affordable and amazing if people want to edit on desktop, and is what I use in my PC, then yeah, it is kind of laughable. But despite that fact that on the surface it doesn't look impressive, or I don't know what kind of magic dust Apple sprinkled on it, but in all those different programs, the performance has been more than enough. Now when it comes to gaming, well, I think you can already guess what I'm about to say. Firstly, it's still a Mac, so game support is still very limited, and also it seems like even Apple doesn't have too high hopes for the gaming performance of this machine, seeing how on the website for it, they are saying that it allows you to play graphically intensive games like Dota 2. Yeah, try saying that one with a straight face. Well anyway, after looking for ages for any game that I could run on both my PC and on this MacBook Pro, I finally found one. And that is Company of Heroes 2. And yeah, the MacBook Pro gets completely destroyed. But hey, it still stands a chance, and hey, at lower settings, it's still definitely possible to enjoy some games. At least any games that you can find that actually run on Mac. However, of course, another thing that many creatives who clearly this laptop hasn't made for have to deal with is exporting their work. So I made a test 5-minute video in Premiere Pro with an about average amount of things like transitions and effects placed on clips, and exported them using the Adobe Media Encoder on both the MacBook Pro and on my PC. And this is definitely where for some people the value proposition of this MacBook Pro may definitely suffer a bit, especially if you don't have, say, a normal Mac at home where you can just export there anything that you worked on the go with your MacBook Pro. So while it took my PC just 22 minutes to export this 5-minute clip, it took the MacBook Pro 44 minutes, exactly double the time. And that's not to mention the fact that during that time it got insanely hot and started to sound more like an airplane. But of course, all these things also need a good battery. So what's the battery in this thing like? Well, it does have a 58.2 watt-hour battery. However, it's definitely not going to last you as long as you think. Even when I was simply just working away in Premiere Pro or Lightroom or anything, I saw the percentage bar on the battery go down pretty quickly. But I decided to run a bit more of a concrete experiment, and I decided to see exactly how much of the battery simply exporting that test clip would suck up. And the act of exporting that test video from earlier brought down the battery by 52%. That's right, a 5-minute clip in Premiere took away 52% of the MacBook Pro's battery, which is just like, whew. So you definitely want to also carry a charger around, and thankfully it does charge rather fast thanks to it being chargeable via USB Type-C. And while we're on the topic, let's talk about the I/O. And I guess from my tone of voice you can tell it's not gonna be good. Now normally if I were to talk about the I/O on a laptop, I wouldn't really mention the power input because, well, it's kind of just something you have on every single laptop. But here it warrants a mention, seeing how there is no power input. You only charge via USB Type-C and that's it. Now, granted, USB Type-C is fast and everything, so that wouldn't be a problem if not for the fact that the MacBook Pro 13-inch only has 2 USB Type-C ports, and that's it. Now, yes, they are both Thunderbolt 3, so they are super fast, but it is still only 2 ports. And then on the other side, it at least has an audio jack, so at least it didn't follow the same footsteps as many modern phones, so that's something. So if you were, say, out and about, want to do some work, then you probably also want to charge your laptop, which would take up one of the 2 USB ports, and then also you'd probably also want a mouse. So you'd have to grab yourself a USB Type-C to Type A dongle, because let's be honest, your mouse probably still runs in Type A, and then bam, you're out of any extra I/O. So definitely it looks like Apple expects you to just buy expansion docks and buy all the dongles you need. So I have no idea how Apple could afford that just 2 USB ports is acceptable, especially seeing how both of them are Type-C. Now yes, I get it, Type-C and Thunderbolt 3, they are very, very versatile ports, but didn't realize why so many modern laptops and desktops and everything like that, why they still have USB Type-A ports? Because most of the world's devices still run on Type A. So with the MacBook Pro, unless you're just completely future ready and have everything running on Type-C already, you most likely find yourself having a ratio of dongles to accessories being like 1:1, which is definitely not a good thing and almost can defeat the purpose of the MacBook Pro. It's supposed to be the portable Mac experience so that you can easily do work on the go. but when you have to do so much setup just to get it nice and functioning, then it makes the whole process feel a bit less, well, special. Now yes, you may not need an additional mouse, the trackpad is excellent and all, and for just some basic usage, the trackpad will serve you well. It really is a nice trackpad, nice, responsive, big, but when you actually sit down to do some proper work, nothing beats a mouse. So yeah, the I/O is a bit of a nightmare. However, if the lack of I/O really gets to you that much and you have a lot more money spare, then you can always go for the 16-inch model that comes with 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports instead. So that's cool. I just don't understand why we couldn't have had that on the 13-inch, because just having 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports makes no sense. I don't know, I guess when I wanted to go for a minimalist design, I guess it also included the I/O. But one thing that's kind of supposed to help with that is the touch bar, a defining feature of the MacBook Pro, and it makes a great return in a 2020 model. It's nice and thin, it's wide, and allows you to do a lot on the go thanks to its touchscreen, which is really excellent to the touch as well. Like literally, I think it's actually even softer to the touch than just a normal phone screen. It allows you to adjust tons of things on the go. It allows you to quickly check up on the information without even having to glance up on the main screen. However, when it comes to a per software basis, well, there's definitely some programs where they put quite a bit of effort into them to make the touch bar experience really great, but for others, like for example a lot of the Adobe suite, there's pretty much no additional features with the touch bar, which is very disappointing. And as you can imagine, when it comes to the touch bar integration, you get a lot more luck with Apple exclusive apps. Right next to the touch bar is another cool feature, a power button with Touch ID, which you can use to both sign into the MacBook itself and also to load in passwords online, which is pretty cool. Though its usefulness is kind of tainted by 2 things. Number 1, it doesn't have the feature that more and more laptops have nowadays, and that is that it caches your fingerprint when you first press on it to actually turn it on, and then uses it when the OS boots up. And the other thing is that, well, when you shut down the MacBook Pro and then want to turn it on again, it requires the password anyway. Like Apple, you do realize it's easy for people to get your password and not your thumb, right?
Oh, and actually, it also has a pretty decent little webcam on it. It's only 720p, but it's more than enough for all the Zoom calls we've been forced to take part in recently. Also, it has an onboard mic, which, as you can hear, actually sounds pretty good. And also, of course, some onboard speakers, which are average at best. Really nothing special, but they get the job done. Though the disappointing fact that there is no good built-in EQ feature also stings quite a bit, especially seeing how most of the ones available on macOS are, well, paid for.
Now, let's talk price. This config, which I have right here, will set you back around $14.99, and that is with a pretty basic starter config, which should be more than enough for many people. And actually, that is the exact same price as a similarly spec'd iMac, though of course the experience on the iMac will be still a lot better thanks to things like, the larger display, way better I/O, and of course way better performance. If you want to upgrade this config to an i7, that alone would cost you $300 extra, which is like insane. And if you want something that will actually rival a normal desktop Mac or PC, then you're gonna spend quite a bit. Around $25.99 for a really high-end spec MacBook Pro with pretty much everything you may need, which actually is also the same price as a similarly spec'd high-end iMac. So that kind of shows who this MacBook Pro is aimed at. For people who want to, for around the same budget as an iMac, have an amazing mobile macOS experience. And this definitely provides that, and it will probably come even closer to that goal when Big Sur launches later this year. And it definitely is mobile as well, with being super light and very small and compact. In fact, it's almost identical in dimensions and weight to the MacBook Air, with the MacBook Pro being just a tad heavier. But also look at this, the MacBook Air has the same screen as the MacBook Pro, 13.3 inches, same resolution and everything, and just like MacBook Pro, it also has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports. So that is what I think this laptop truly is. It's the evolved form of the 13-inch MacBook Air. The similarities are really obvious, and maybe that's just who Apple is going for here as well. People who are used to the MacBook Air maybe they really want a MacBook Air, but they want a MacBook Air that has the horsepower to allow them to do what they do on the go. So if you're the kind of person, this MacBook Pro is definitely for you. It has pretty much everything you need to get your work done on the go. But of course, that is if you're fine with it being a MacBook still. So if you're really just looking for a on-the-go macOS experience, then this is definitely for you. Because apart from the touch bar, it doesn't offer too much. So if you really just need macOS, then yeah, definitely go for this. It's still a great Apple laptop, but that's the thing. It's a great Apple laptop. Because if you don't want to have macOS and want to have Windows instead, and by the way, Adobe, which is what most of the creative world uses, runs on both macOS and Windows. If you're one of those people who doesn't care about having macOS, then this thing is insanely overpriced. You can get a way better laptop for a similar price. So it all depends who you are. If you really value the operating system so much and the overall Apple experience so much, then you could definitely go worse than this. It's still a pretty sick laptop, even if I don't personally understand what exactly you see in this whole Apple way of doing things. And hey, if you're someone who's buying an Apple product, then that probably means you're pretty minted, right? Then maybe check out my Patreon down in the video description below, because even $1 a month goes a long way in helping out this channel. It allows you to make even better videos on way more interesting topics. And I also like to thank my patrons Gavin Burns and LKB, thank you ever so much. Down there you can find our Amazon links if you literally want to buy anything on Amazon. Then if you use our links, you don't pay anything extra, we get some of the money. So it's literally a win-win. Down there is also a link to my Discord if you want to talk to me about this or whatever else really. And like I said, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to subscribe, like, whatever. And I'll see you all in my next. Goodbye everyone. Goodbye.